Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this session of the Strategic Thinkers series. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Lieutenant General Michel Maisonneuve, who is the author of In Defense of Canada, Reflections of a Patriot. Michel, welcome.
Merci beaucoup, Paul. Thank you for inviting me.
What motivated you to write this book?
Well, since that speech in November 2022 in Ottawa, when I was received and I was honored to receive the Vimy Award, I've written a number of articles in the National Post. I found that my speech, which was I wanted it to be a hard-hitting speech, but was in a lot of ways my remarks were taken out of context. The truth is that I'd been unhappy with the way our country was and had been going for a long time. And so I had made that speech to talk about our country and to talk about our country as a Canadian, not as a partisan of one way or another. And after the speech, seeing the way my comments were taken out of context, a lot of them, of course, I was canceled in many milieus. So I thought, okay, if I write a book now, I can perhaps expand on some of the themes that I brought out during the speech. And so the book is kind of it's a further elaboration of my thoughts on things. It's my opinion on where our country stands today and where it needs to go.
Drawing from your research, Michel, and your personal experience, what do you see as the national challenges facing Canada?
Well, at this point, I think we have a crisis in leadership, and along with that, we have a crisis of complacency also in our country. And so, what I mean by leadership, the leadership that we have today, I believe, I call it radical progressivism, and I believe that they're taking us in the wrong direction. So we need leadership that has more common sense. We need Canadians to be less complacent than they are, and I talk about this, it just seems that Canadians go along with whatever the government of the day decides, without really a care and, without voicing their opinion and making themselves heard. So we need Canadians, I think, to change from that point of view. So along with that, some of the challenges we have are, of course, our defense. We are undefended, I believe, in Canada. We have a minute armed forces. We have lack of personnel, lack of equipment, lack of sustainability, so that is a real issue in itself. We are squandering our resources, I believe. It's a huge national challenge, and unfortunately, some of the leadership is taking us in a direction I think that is not only wrong, but actually is dangerous for our country. So these are some of the generally large issues that are facing our country at this point.
In your view, what do you perceive as the contemporary and future threats confronting Canada and Canadians?
Well, as I mentioned, Canada is undefended, I think. And, now we never expected that we would be now faced with state-on-state wars, what we're seeing with Russia and Ukraine. So from that point of view, our country is facing these rogue states such as China, Russia, North Korea, Iran as well. And we're seeing it now play out, what can happen with these rogue states that are supporting terrorism, that are interfering in our affairs. It's really an insidious menace. As well, internally, I believe there are issues, and I think that menace is again what I mentioned earlier: the radical progressivism that has an impact on everything in Canada. And so these are really threats of today, but they're threats that will continue in the future. And so what we need to do, of course, is to react to those threats, prepare ourselves to react to those threats, and we are really not ready right now to face them at all. So we need to do better there.
There is a feeling that nothing works in Canada, and that we are on our way to becoming a failing state. What do you think? And if so, in what respects?
Well, I've been thinking about this, of course, and are we moving towards being a failed state? Are we a failing state? Look, I don't think we are. I don't think we're anywhere near being a failed state. However, we are not achieving the potential that we have in our country, and that's I think a huge issue. And how do we achieve that potential? Well, the economy, our resources, our leadership internationally. And I know that we're going to talk about this a little further on, but I think just these three aspects. The economy, we're spending way beyond our means. And if you were doing that in your own house, in your own family, you couldn't maintain it. You're kind of giving away the future of our country, and our children and grandchildren are going to be faced with our economy that's got a huge debt, deficit spending every year, radical social programs, a social safety net that is truly extreme, where, it's almost as if Canadians have forgotten that with the privilege of citizenship comes responsibilities, and personal responsibility and social responsibility, that you cannot continue to receive these social programs without actually being responsible and contributing to the country. So there are a lot of things that are not working in Canada. Of course, you mentioned some of them in terms of affordability. So that's also part of the economy. Our resources. I say in the book that our resources are being almost sacrificed at the altar of climate change, and truly, our country produces only 1.6% of the world's greenhouse gases. However, we're behaving as if we are a huge polluter that we need to actually kill our resources, as opposed to using our resources to help other countries become greener. And an example is coal. I mean, China are building coal plants, continuously now building coal plants at this time, as is India. Those are huge polluters, and you don't look at it per capita because we've only got a small population. Yes, we're emitting a lot, but these guys are emitting hundreds of times more than we are. Perhaps not hundreds, but dozens of times more than we are. So we could be using our resources, clean gas, for example, clean natural gas, to help them get off the coal. But we're not doing that. When our prime minister says to the chancellor of Germany, there is no business case for natural gas on the east coast of Canada, I think that's ludicrous. It's unbelievably ludicrous. And so the chancellor leaves with no help from our country, who could really have come to help Europe get off of Russian gas, and we could have certainly contributed to that. So these are some of the things that show that we are not living to our potential. And the final thing I would say at this point is leadership internationally. We could be leaders, and we have been leaders in the past, and internationally in our alliances. We are no longer even consulted now, Paul, as you know, when new alliances are being talked about, and so that's where we are today, and it's sad. It's sad to see, but we are really a lot of things are not working in our country.
Analysts have posited that Canada and her allies have three existential threats, as you pointed out: the People's Republic of China, Russia, and Iran, and some would include the fourth, North Korea. We have potential domestic threats from the so-called ultra-right and the left, and possible domestic civil unrest emanating from issues to include terrorism sympathies in Canada with regards to Palestinians and Sikhs, the PRC penetration of Canadian society and government institutions, and the potential spillover of violence from upcoming U.S. elections, as 25% of U.S. citizens fear post-election violence. Is Canada prepared to respond to these domestic, national, and multinational challenges?
Well, I would, in a word, I would say no. The problem we have, I think, is that there's a lot of virtue signaling going on with very little action. I don't think we're prepared for these dangers. We're not prepared for these threats from either from outside or from internally as well in Canada. And so that's what I was talking about earlier when I said we need to really achieve our potential. So how do we prepare for this? Well, you really need to think about what are the threats, and then you develop activities. You develop ways to face these threats with some common sense. And instead of virtue signaling, you actually take specific, forceful action. I really think our commission now of inquiry into interference is bringing out a lot of interesting points. We'll see what the final report says, but frankly, I get the sense that this is going to be another one of these reports that'll be put on a table on a shelf and really not actioned. But even, for example, the U.S. election. At this point, people are talking about, oh, what if Donald Trump is elected? Well, you can talk about it all you want. The point is that he may very well get elected. In my view, right now, he is going to get elected. And if he does, then how does Canada react? Well, we have not really thought about, what are we going to do if he does get elected? We've worried about it, but I don't think there's been any action that is going to take place. How do we prepare for such a thing? Again, Canada can show that it is a strong nation. It can react to these threats by being prepared. And it's also a question of having a strong enough economy that does not live beyond its means, but that spends its money so that it is a strong and stable country that is able to react to threats. So right now we're not doing it. I think there's too much virtue signaling going on and not enough actual action.
Michel, what measures should Canada be prepared to undertake to ensure our domestic security and to return civility and respect to our daily lives?
Yeah, civility and respect. You watch Question Period, and you can really see that some of the division in our country is present there, and it's much like the division and so on that's happening in the U.S. as well. Part of leadership is to be a unifying force. If you're a leader, you're supposed to be the leader for all of the people that you're leading. You cannot keep on breaking people and calling some of them fringe minorities or special interest groups, and you can't continue to force people to go into these special interest groups and promote that kind of approach to lead. Leadership means unity, and you need to unite people. So you need common sense. You can't have extremism of the left or of the right, by the way. And you need to kind of find yourself a middle ground where you can bring people together. How do you do that? Well, one of the things I don't think we've ever done in Canada is to develop a vision for our country. I mean, ask yourself, what is a Canadian? Do we ever ask or do we ever define what a Canadian is? I don't think we have. So to me, I guess one of the issues, one of the things that a leader should do is say, okay, let's define what Canada is. What is Canada? What is a Canadian? What we say is, oh, a Canadian is not an American. We are not Americans. Well, if that's the only way we define ourselves, it's not very useful. So I think we need to have develop ourselves a vision for our country. What is a Canadian? What are our values? And so when people now come from other countries, when immigration happens in Canada, these people should know that they're coming to this country with the following Judeo-Christian principles on which it was founded, and with the values that are enumerated and that we believe in, that all Canadians can assimilate themselves into. And I say assimilate, but I don't mean that you get rid of your own, whatever culture you came from. However, that does not then become the strongest piece of being a Canadian. A Canadian should be, you're joining this country that has all this potential and this beautiful, huge country with a small population from sea to shining sea, from sea to sea and to sea, actually, up to the north. With the founding peoples of our country, the First Nations, French, English, who came together to form this country. So we need to have this common sense, not extremist view, define what is Canada with its values, and then join that. So how do you bring civility and respect? Well, you bring it by not creating divisions among the people. And that's one way that I see of doing it, is to bring people to join this lovely country, and bring back civility and respect to our daily lives. I think that's kind of my prescription for it.
As Canadians, we have, and our responsibility, failed our duty and international responsibility to our friends and allies. What is your view?
Well, failed. Yeah, I guess we have, to a certain extent, we've failed our responsibility. I mean, I said earlier, we're no longer even consulted, never mind participate, but we're not even asked to participate or consulted as to how we think particular organizations should go forward. So, one of the things that I think Canadians don't understand is the importance of the Canadian Armed Forces in terms of our international image. I mean, one of the things, as you know, Paul, as a former service member, our country, when it participates in international operations, receives a lot of credit. It's highly thought of. Our Canadian young men and women who serve in the military are still incredible young people. They don't have the means to be the best they can be, unfortunately, and we can talk about that a little further later. But to reinforce the ability of the Canadian Armed Forces to participate in international operations would be the first thing I would do. Alongside that, our diplomats are also hands tied behind their back. We heard recently that diplomats were no longer going to be sent on language courses before they're deployed to their country. How silly is that, eh? I mean, one of the things that made us so strong compared to, for example, the Americans, who often diplomats deploy without any knowledge of the country or the language of the country they're deploying to. It made us different because we would make sure that, people would get a year-long or 2-year language course before they deployed, which allowed them to immediately make connections in the country and participate and and advocate for our country in the country, the host country. We're no longer doing that. So I think the diplomats are feeling the pinch as much as the Canadian Armed Forces are. And I think that that is one place where we could really help. So this means that we could actually take a lead and take a strong role in our international organizations, such as NORAD, and the money that now we're talking about, the 5 or 6 billion, I guess we're going to do on NORAD modernization. That's been a long time coming, and it should be accelerated so that we are actually strong players in NORAD. Right now, we are not. Our ability to actually take action, not just to detect, but to take action as part of NORAD is very reduced. We've got 2 small bases that are hours away from the north, in Bagotville and Cold Lake, that, it's very difficult for us to react to anything going on. We ought to be looking at our north and making it making us ourselves more able to actually react to something going on in the north by forward deploying bases, basing personnel up north. I mean, all we rely on right now are the Rangers, who are fantastic, but there's 300-400 of them. That's it. So, we need to do a better job there. And so we have failed in our duty. And then you look at NATO. Okay, we're talking about our battle group in Latvia. That battle group's going up to 2,200, I think, personnel in the next couple of years. That's great. But it takes the entire Canadian Army to be able to bring that up to 2,200 people, to be able to equip it properly, and to sustain it. And as they said, it was going to be not a permanent, but they called it something else, a persistent, I think, presence. That is silly, and that goes to show you that our armed forces are so minute, so small, and so incapable of doing things that it takes the entire army to support 2,200 2,200 brigade group. Piece of brigade group in Latvia. So we are failing, and in some instances we're not even asked to participate. So that's that's the next thing. That's horrible.
Michel, what does the Canadian government need to do to reclaim Canada's status regionally, globally, and with our allies?
Well, I mean, it follows on to what we just discussed. I think the government, Canada, needs to decide if it wants to be unprotected and undefended in our country and unable to participate in missions. If we want to be able to defend ourselves in case of a threat direct to our country, if we want to find ourselves able to participate in international missions, we're going to have to fix the armed forces. We're going to have to make the armed forces more capable. First of all, redress and try to achieve actually the capabilities that we have now. But I think we need to expand the armed forces to much greater than what they are supposed to be at whatever 70,000 regular and 30,000 reservists. The word is that we're missing 16,500 people right now, approximately. I believe it's more than that. And it's going to take years to bring that back up, to recruit and to get people back into service. The other problem, of course, is not just the numbers of people that we're missing, it's the type of people we're missing. We're missing that middle cadre of young men and women, in their between 30 and 40, who are now leaving. And you can't replace those people who are, sergeants, warrant officers, and captains and majors who took 20 years to get where they are with a new recruit. You need the time to bring these people up to replace them. So that's a real issue. So the Canadian government, first thing we need to do is reinforce the armed forces, bring them up to a higher level, I believe. And what does that mean? Well, it means that there are so many currently social programs that are competing for the money that the budgets that Canada has, that we're going to need to make some difficult decisions. I believe that no other social programs are can be had unless you have country that can protect itself. I mean, they say you either have your own army or somebody else's army in your country, right? So I mean, it's quite simple. And I believe Canada, as a middle power, could be one of the strongest middle powers in the world, and that would go along with improving our abilities and our participation in these international institutions, such as NATO, NORAD, the OSCE, the UN. And right now we don't have a voice. I mean, I think, just looking at the UN, which, I find is in many ways a corrupt organization and morally corrupt. But there are some places where it can still do a lot of good. Peacekeeping is certainly one way. And we could do better in peacekeeping. I believe we've got like some 45 people right now doing peacekeeping, as opposed to what we had before in the thousands. So, our forces can't do everything, but it certainly can do better, and our country can do much better.
As you pointed out earlier, Michel, Canada is now being seen or sometimes excluded in some of the evolving multinational alliances and arguably marginalized amongst its friends and allies. If so, what should be the priorities of Canada's next government to ensure and grow our reputation at the big table?
Well, you're right. I mean, when you look at AUKUS is a prime example, but you can also look at the Quad, this organization in the Pacific that we could be part of. But even AUKUS, there's no question that we were not even consulted on that one. This was a huge surprise to Canadians and to the government. And of course, what was the response? Well, the response was that AUKUS was an arrangement about submarines, nuclear submarines only, and that we didn't need to take part in it. Well, you know what? It's not just that. As you know, Paul, there's a number of tiers there to that to AUKUS, and it all means that it would be a great place for us to participate. I personally think nuclear submarines would be outstanding for our country, and that we need them to patrol our north. However, there's also a second level now that talks about technology and a lot of sharing of information and sharing of capabilities in that. The Quad, again, Japan and Canada, or I mean Japan and the U.S. and so on. We could join that, and we should be part of that. We're a huge Pacific nation, so we're not even asked to participate in these organizations. It's absolutely ridiculous. So we talked about NATO earlier. We try our best to participate in NATO. We're certainly not doing as much as our potential would allow us to do. The UN, we're not participating. So how do we do it? How do we improve our capabilities to do this? Well, I was going to say earlier, the first thing we need to do is straighten out our economy, our country, make sure that we are strong enough to be able to do that by a good internal internal economy, affordability. Canadians need to be proud of their country. They need to have hope for the future. And right now, I think that's missing. And then that strong economy and a strong country, you radiate outward, and then you participate in other organizations, including leadership. And Canada's has shown leadership in the past in terms of international organizations. When we decide that we're going to lead in certain areas, I mean, we're leading in the NATO battle group now in Latvia. That's great, but that capability is at the price of the entire armed forces capability in Canada. So we just don't have enough to bring more strong leadership. So we could certainly do better in that. And I think it's a question of, again, living within our means, increasing our strength from the internal point of view, our economy, and then radiating outward.
Some would argue that there is a dearth of leadership in Canada. You've pointed that out earlier, not just politically, but in many areas of our society. You wrote in your book about creating a leadership book that you, as a young officer, carried on throughout your career. How was this useful? And based upon your experience, what kind of leadership does Canada need to develop and grow, and how do we address this gap?
Well, leadership's always been one of the things I think about, and I've written about, and I've talked about, and I've lectured about. And as you know, Paul, there are thousands of leadership books out there. And, I was just looking at one of mine over here. This guy, Rick Hillier.
Yes.
And this is a book he wrote in 2010 called Leadership, 50 Points of Wisdom for Today's Leaders. And the first thing he talks about is leadership is about people. He's absolutely right. And my leadership book I developed when I was a young officer. The first thing that happened to me when I was when an officer cadet, a sergeant major said to me, "Sir, what are your leadership principles?" And I had never thought about it. You kind of go about your life when you're a young lad, and so I put some thought into it, and I developed my leadership principles. I thought these are the four things that are important to me, and they're in the book if you're interested. But it really follows on what Rick was saying in terms of it's about people, and to treat people right, and to lead them, make them want to do something, make them want to be led, is the whole thing. So first thing is you develop your principles, and then I thought, as my career went on, as a young officer, as my career went on, I said, I decided to take just a 3-ring binder or a small book, and to look at every time a leadership lesson would happen. And I looked at what was the actual issue, the challenge that was going on, how the leader reacted, and I made notes about how they react. Sometimes they did great, sometimes they did poorly. And so, to me, this was kind of a way for me to learn lessons from the different leaders that I saw as I went along in my career. Turned out to be very cool, and I used it throughout the rest of my career. I still have it; it's downstairs in my papers. And my leadership principles, the 4 that I developed, I used throughout my career in the military. And I was in the military 35 years, and then I did another 10 years in the academic world as the academic director at RMC Saint Jean, and there, even with my civilian colleagues, I would expose what my 4 leadership principles are and say, this is the way that I lead. They were aware that was of the things that were important to me as a leader, and then they could guide themselves accordingly. But really, there were so many times when I was surprised at the leadership that these young men and women, who were sometimes my subordinates, sometimes my peers, and of course many great leaders that I served under. So it's always interesting, and with as far as subordinates go, the subordinates, Canadians. And I said earlier, our personnel in the armed forces, even though they don't get all the means they should have to do the things they are asked to do, still surprise you with their abilities, their initiative, their personal kind of ability to get things done. And if you challenge them, they will surprise you every time. And I've been very fortunate to have many work with me, and to be their boss at times, and to be their peer, and to be working under some great leaders as well. So, no, it's I think it's in my view, leadership is something that every person possesses a certain level of. It's almost like an Olympic athlete. Olympic athletes, there are far and few between, but I think everybody has skiers, everybody has the ability to ski or is able to get the ability to ski. Those ones are going to go to the Olympics are the ones that have an innate ability and then work their butt off to get the best that they can be. Well, leaders are kind of the same thing in my view. Everybody has a certain amount of leadership, and some of them will use that and improve on it and learn and practice it so that they get to the point where they are the best leaders at the highest level. Others will never reach that, but some of them don't care as much as others do, and I think so. Leadership is something that everybody possesses, and if you study and work on it and improve it, you can learn a lot of things as well. So I think those are the ways to develop your principles. Look at others out there, leaders that you appreciate, learn from them, and then use common sense. And I think there's a middle ground there that you can use throughout your life as a leader. So that's a lot of thought about leadership there.
Thank you. Lastly, how can we attract, educate, and train, as well as retain generational leadership now and into the future?
Okay, well, I mean, that just follows on to what I was just saying. And of course, if you think that, okay, everybody has a certain amount of leadership and then you can learn and go from there, this goes to the fact that our schools and our universities need to be able to produce leaders. And at this point, as you know, as we've discussed before, there's too much DEI in certainly our universities and certainly in our schools as well. We need to go back to simple meritocracy or inclusive meritocracy. And leaders, I talked earlier about the responsibilities of citizenship as well as the benefits of citizenship. Well, there are also responsibilities in terms of service. Mm-hmm. I believe that service is not highlighted enough in our country, that we need to make Canadians understand that service is important. Every Canadian should serve in certain ways. And I'm not talking about serving in the military here, but I'm sure talking about serving in some capacity in our country to improve it. And so through schools, through our universities, we need to teach leaders. We need to bring them to have that responsibility of service. And I think that's the way that we're going to attract and retain these leaders that we need in the future. You need them now, and you need them in the future. And Canadians can do it. Look, our country's fantastic. It's a beautiful, strong country with the utmost potential. But we need to bring it to that point where it reaches its potential. It achieves the potential that it has. And Canadians will understand if you have a vision, if you are saying everything I'm going to do now as a government is going to be to achieve that vision, Canadians will jump on the bandwagon and will participate, and they will contribute to that vision and to bring us to the potential that we can reach.
Michel, thank you for your valuable insights to Canada and its future. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today. On behalf of Policy Insights Forum, we look forward to having you on again in the near future. Merci, mon général.
Merci, Paul. Ça me fait plaisir. Take care. Thank you.
Take care. Cheers.